Welcome to the LPTV Broadcasters Association Podcast. LPTVBA is a nonprofit organization that champions the growth, innovation, and protection of all divisions of low-power television, or as we like to say, local power television. Our volunteer board is made up of industry leaders who collaborate with technology innovators and policymakers to advance next-generation technologies, advocate for smart regulatory policies, and create new opportunities that deliver hyper-local impact with national-scale reach. Through this podcast, we bring together industry professionals to discuss FCC developments, legislative and regulatory issues, emerging technologies, 5G broadcast advancements, groundbreaking experiments shaping the future of broadcasting, and the opportunities ahead for our industry. Thanks for listening, and welcome to the conversation.
And welcome, episode 3. Bill, can you believe this? LPTV Broadcasters Association's podcast for August 2026. And today we have something new. Bill and I are going to have a guest to talk to, and it's the one, the only Davina Sashkin. So we're going to start off with something for our first-time listeners, and that is, what is LPTV? Bill, can you clear this up?
I really thought we were going to be canceled by now, so I have done no preparation whatsoever. Sorry. Low power television.
Local power.
A local power, which a name which brings a lot of a stigma to some people, and a name that most people that are in the LPTV business don't particularly love, because it has nothing to do with quality or quantity or type of equipment or resolution. It's a tricky name to start off for a tricky business.
So is it like low power FM? It goes like down the block?
No, this is, there's some serious stations. Most of them go at least 15, 20-mile radius from their transmitter. I've seen them go as far as 45, 50, 60 miles from there. Most towns aren't that wide. So actually, if you're in a downtown Rochester, New York, where we have a station, you can receive us just as well as you can receive every other TV station in town.
So there are about 1,700 full power stations and about 5,200 right now and growing low power stations, LPTV stations in the U.S. So generally, LPTV stations are limited to 15,000 watts of output, and theoretically, you go 30 miles with that. Full power can go how high? A megawatt.
The more power you add, every time you double your power, you only add like 3 dB or maybe 4 or 5 miles to your signal. So it is a law of diminishing returns as you add lots and lots of power. And it gets really expensive too.
So if you're watching at home and you're scanning, you get both LPTV and full power stations.
Side by side.
Yep, side by side. They live there very comfortably. And we represent the LPTV station. So everything we talk about, mostly everything, is the LPTV world. And joining us too is Shayna Farr, who's our membership director of LPTV Broadcasters Association. Hi, tell us, how do we become part of this?
I will tell you all about it. If you're listening to this podcast and you're not yet a member of the LPTV Broadcasters Association, we invite you to join us because it's an exciting time for our industry, and your membership helps us do the work that we do. We are a nonprofit organization that works on your behalf. We advocate for low-power television in Washington, D.C. We keep you informed on important FCC developments. We have expanded our outreach with these podcasts. And we host a popular and informative day at the NAB show. And we are a leading voice in the conversation around the future of technologies in LPTV broadcasting. And as a member, you also receive exclusive industry news, special member-only benefits from our industry partners, and access to resources and opportunities available only to the LPTVBA community. And with your membership, you're investing in and helping to strengthen and protect the future of low-power television for everyone. So visit lptvba.org, that's lptvba.org, and click on the Join Us button at the top of the page to learn more about what we do. And become a member today. We'd love to have you with us. So, okay, Frank, back over to you.
Why, thank you. I want to join. Hold it. We're volunteers. We have a great volunteer board. that
Mhm.
does a lot of work, and Bill and I are both volunteers and both on the board. And we love doing this podcast because Bill is on a mission to be, what is it? Almost famous? No, nearly famous.
We're not there yet, baby. Not there yet. The other thing that the LPTV Association does really, really well is represent these over 5,000 TV stations, particularly in Washington, D.C. And as that pertains mostly to working with the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. And the beauty of today's guest is she is a big-time FCC lawyer with a big-time FCC firm, and she is not charging anybody watching this a penny. So we can take most of our time, just pick her brain and get some free advice on all kinds of information about the FCC.
Absolutely. And Davina, you are big time.
And free today.
And free just today.
A one-time offer.
Wow. So let's start off with March 19th.
So on March 19th was the first in a very, very long time, an open filing opportunity from the FCC for brand new LPTV construction permits, which is a fancy way of saying a new station opportunity. I don't even know how many we're up to now.
It's like 2,500. Yeah.
I knew it was around there. It's kind of fluctuated each day. So a lot of folks have taken that opportunity and filed for new stations, and also have the opportunity at the same time to move existing licensed stations wherever they wanted to and change channel. So this is something that the LPTVBA worked really hard on, and we're just never letting it go with the FCC, which is what you have to do, is be persistent, be pleasant and respectful, but persistent. And in this case, a lot of folks are going to be able to have a new station serving the public. It's an ongoing opportunity. It is continuing. You could file today, you can file tomorrow, and those applications are being granted on a
Well, that
rolling
brings a
basis.
bunch of questions. I think as of this morning, there were about a little under 500, maybe 488 applications actually had gone to the next step, which is to go on public notice. And 30 days later, if nobody files against them, they may get granted. A couple hundred of those have already been granted. I think we were all surprised to see 2,500 applications, and there's a couple people that applied for hundreds and hundreds of stations.
That's right.
Do you have a sense? What we've heard is, they're basically granting the easy ones first, the ones that aren't mixed or interfering with other applications, which gets real tricky. It seems like they're doing a handful every day, and they have been growing the number. Do you hear anything about the process as far as timing or what's going on with? There's a bunch of moves for Class A's. There's a bunch of MX. How do they resolve that? What do you hear?
I think the first thing to know is there have been a lot of changes in the Media Bureau and the video division overall in terms of staffing and demands on their time. So there's a lot of work being done by fewer people or people who don't have necessarily the background. So there was a time period after the filing opportunity began, and when a lot of these public notices started, where it was a little bit of kerfuffle, I guess, is where there were some questions about certain things that had been submitted in the filings and whether there were amendments that were needed. And there was a whole lot of internal debate. And I had communications, and a couple of other members of us lawyers who represent LPTV station owners had many communications with the FCC staff and the current acting bureau chief about that. That was finally resolved in June. And at that point, things really started moving along. So I think there was a little bit of a roadblock, and now it seems like things have smoothed out. You were right, Bill. They always get processed the low-hanging fruit, right? It's easy, right? Then you go through, and is there any interference? Does everything check the box? They literally have somebody going through and check in. There's a checklist, right? Like, does it meet all the legal obligations? And then there's also the engineer, who is Mark Colombo, which we hold near and dear to our hearts, who also runs his own second analysis to make sure the analysis the engineers have put forward actually is the real analysis and won't create interference and won't cause anything,
So for people
Right.
who are listening for the first time, how do you figure out where to apply for a station? So when we say stations are interfering with each other, the opportunity to apply was really nationwide. Put it
Correct.
wherever there's room. Figure out a channel, find the space, and you can apply. So to do that, you basically hire a consulting engineer, tell them, this is where I'd like to look. And Bill, you filed a lot of applications, so you should be the one explaining this.
Well, I mean, the FCC has been granting licenses since like 1923 or something, or 40s. The spectrum, was already pretty crowded. Like in most big cities, there already were almost all the frequencies were gone. The challenge, I think, for a lot of people in this window was to find some holes where they could insert a channel. Certainly easier in the western part of the country where it's more broad and wide open spaces. But also, you have to say, well, what kind of a business can I have here? If I'm reaching 4,000 homes and I have to spend all this money to build a transmitter and get on the air and run it, how do I not lose money or lose less money on that than in a big city? So I think that was the challenge that I saw in this past window. There's still certainly slivers all around. In the top 25 markets, it's pretty tight. Unless you're coming in from the edge, I can tell you there's just not a lot of stuff out there that you could apply for new right now. And that also brings me to the question of interference and these what they call MX, mutually exclusive application. I don't think we've actually received guidance from the FCC. And informally, they have auction authority, which they didn't have for the last couple of years, so that if I apply for a station and SuperFrank applies for a station, they're on top of each other. I think the first thing the FCC wants us to do is go ahead and figure it out. Move our antennas. Can we have some business arrangement to join up or to do something, or one guy walks away? I think they prefer to have that done first, which is one of the reasons they're kind of pushing them down the road a little. And I've seen definitely some agreements and some things done. I'll give you this market if you give me that market kind of thing. You can't profit off of selling an application, but there's things you can do. I don't think we know yet from the FCC how and when they intend to resolve the ones that don't get fixed. Do you know, Davina?
I have no idea. And when we've pushed on that, the last public notice that was put out basically said, we'll tell you when we're ready. That's not helpful. I do think, yes, to the extent that folks can resolve MXs themselves. And as Bill alluded to, it's mutually exclusive means it doesn't even necessarily mean you're on the same channel. You could be, first adjacent. You could be on the same channel and in different markets, but because your contours touch, there's interference, and it's considered. If there's interference over, what is it, the 2% threshold?
2%. Yep.
For low power.
For low power.
And 0.5% for full power and
Right.
class A.
In this case, we're talking about low power to low power. So it'd be, if it's above the 2% threshold, then it's considered mutually exclusive. Now, you can reach agreements among yourselves where you consent to receiving, it has to be received in interference. Like if SuperFrank files something it's next door to Bill Christian station and it's predicted to cause 4% interference to Bill, and SuperFrank says, "Hey, Bill, can I get you to consent to that extra 2%?" And he signs something that says yes. You file an amendment with the FCC. That's it. That's all they need to do. Now, the FCC probably would not like it, although there's no rule that says you can't do it if it's like 80% interference, because then what's the point of having a station at all? Anything under 10-15%, typically I have seen, and don't quote me because there's always an exception, but I have seen the FCC not bat an eye at this, because the FCC does want you to work those things out. But also there's engineering solutions.
Right. So like any business, any situation, there are people who are very detail oriented, and there are people who might be a little sloppy with their work. How is the FCC? Do you have any feeling on how the FCC is going to look at some of the sloppy work that was done?
Knowing Mark Colombo and how I've seen him operate so far, he's a lovely person and tends to give folks the benefit of the doubt. And if there's something that is clearly just a mistake in the sense of, you can tell maybe a number was transposed inadvertent, he's going to reach out and he'll say, look, just fix it. No big
Right.
deal, do an amendment. There's some question that's been raised about certain applications that may have been filed. Maybe sloppy is not the right way, but strategically filed in a way that suggests they can't possibly be built, all of them. Maybe like a hedging your bets kind of situation, meaning multiple applications for say the same channel or multiple applications for a particular area by one entity or commonly owned entities. I'm not sure yet how the FCC is going to proceed on those. I will say that none of the ones that I've had my eye on in those kind of scenarios, none of them have gone on public notice yet. And stuff started going on public notice in May. So that tells me that they are being scrutinized. I'm not sure how the FCC is dealing with.
Sticking with interference in
Mm-hmm.
general, not
Sure.
just about this window, but LPTV stations are by statute secondary in service. And basically what goes through my mind, if you have suddenly 2,500 brand new applicants, and if say half of them get granted, you're talking about a massive number of new stations signing on the air. So historically, if a full power station is getting interfered with by a low power station, there's a process where they can say, hey, you're interfering with me. And the low power guy has to fix it or go off the air or something. And I haven't seen or heard of many of those in the past. I wonder about that in the future. And I don't really understand the process of how that works. Does the full power station have to start by really proving with like field tests that there is interference? Does the low power station have to prove it's not? What do you know what the process is off the top of your head?
So one of the things that the LPTVBA asked for in some recent rulemaking that the FCC did to clarify a lot of the rules and regulations for low power television, one of the things we really worked on was trying to get clarity on what happens and what are the standards for deciding, is this a true interference issue? The full power station can say, hey, this FM translator is interfering. It's causing interference. They need to go off the air. Well, full power FM stations were abusing that power. I actually got into a huge fight. I represented a translator over 100 miles away from the FM station owned by Hubbard. And they said, yeah, well, it was co-channel, and whether there was actual interference, I questioned it. And the fact of the matter, it was 100 miles away and well beyond their protected contour. So we argued about it. My client did not win in that case, but it was part of the effort that was referenced to change these rules, because this is abusive to these smaller entities. They can get knocked off at any time by stations that are hundreds of miles away. So there is a standard in the FM translator world where there has to be a certain number of actual complaints that are verified. It has to be within your contour, etc. And we wanted similar language for LPTV. The FCC declined to move forward with that. They still want to deal with this on a case-by-case basis.
So let's move on to emergency alert system, which is under review right now. It's going to hopefully change very shortly. Davina, would you like to set it up?
Sure. So in the July meeting of the FCC commissioners, they adopted an order to do basically a holistic overhaul of the EAS system, emergency alert system. A lot of those changes to rules had to do with not broadcast specific. A lot of it has to do with wireless alerting, your phone alerting and that sort of thing. There are a few of the rules that were updated in that are for broadcasters. They essentially are, you have to update your passwords, you have to make sure to update your software, and you have to put your EAS behind a firewall for network security.
You just struck one of Bill's favorite discussion points. Update your software. Bill,
Yeah.
Would you like to chime in on that?
It does burn me. Typically, LPTV station owners are operating on shoestring budgets to start with and trying to find a business plan that works. And the requirement to receive 2 radio stations, including in most markets, an AM radio station, analog radio stations, as well as a stream of information for emergency alerts, it's a very specialized bunch of equipment that not a lot of people make. And for how little it does, it costs a real lot of money compared to, in my opinion, the rest of the whole broadcast chain. And there's not a lot of options to work around it. So it just, I sit here and it's like, so it's demanded that we do all these things because the emergency alerts are so important. But this is to a service that they say is secondary. We're not going to protect your contours. We might pull the rug out and just make you disappear tomorrow. Can't get bank loans because the bank will say, well, what's to stop the FCC from doing an auction or something and taking your stations away? So on
Right.
one hand, we're like so super important that we have to have the very best system of all these different ways of getting it that's very expensive. On the other hand, we're not sure that you matter. We're not sure that you're going to be here tomorrow. We don't care. So it's like, it feels to me like you should pick one or the other. Either make these stations protected and say they're worth protecting, or don't require them to have all this. Or do a compromise, say, if you can just get it one way, if you just get a stream in there, that's good enough. And when you look at new technology coming out, that's already figured out. But the FCC is kind of behind on the regulations on that, in my opinion. Frank?
I couldn't agree more. So the box is about $5,000 to buy and about 10% a year in maintenance upkeep, 3 to 5,000, let's say, for the box. And it is antiquated technology. And what was it, 2-3 years ago? 70% of all stations during the test failed. So if 70% fail, is it the system that's wrong or is it the operators? Methinks the system. So looking at that and reading what the FCC put out in their bulletin, they also acknowledged that it was not functioning the way it should, not producing the results. So they are looking at IP delivery. So if you look at, for example, the cell phone world, it's all digitally delivered to the cell phone carriers. In a 5G broadcast in the modulator, you need no other equipment, nothing. It just comes right in.
Well, so on that point, so the FCC adopted this order that largely is focused on non-broadcast issues, but does have those new requirements. We don't yet have a deadline because it depends on when it gets published in the Federal Register. Suffice it to say, you have approximately 2 months, give or take. So shoot for no later than the end of September. You're probably fine. But there's also some additional questions we have about issues that were raised in this proceeding that we want to flesh out. Among the questions is, should we offer alternative delivery mechanisms such as IP? How does that work? What would be the benefits? What would be the potential pitfalls? I'm sure SuperFrank is going to encourage a lot of participation in that record, because as Bill said, listen, this is super expensive. It's a faulty system. If you're providing service to the public, and that is, the primary service offered by LPTV stations, then let's find a way to actually make this serve the public, but in a way that doesn't bankrupt the station.
Can we suggest that the Media Bureau just talk to the Wireless Bureau since they already did it?
I mean, yes, you can have them talk to each other, but they always like it written out. Anytime so the way that rulemaking works under is the Administrative Procedures Act, there has to be a process. There has to be a notice. You have to have comment, which is discussion, right? Everybody gets in there and gets to say their piece. And then you have the rulemaking. So just saying, hey, Media Bureau, go talk to Wireless Bureau, that's not in the record. We need to be in the record.
So the final question, are you ready?
I don't know.
Is all about early renewals. One of our members got hit with an early renewal for all their stations, as did ABC. What is going on with that? What's the latest?
Well, process-wise, on those renewals, I believe the comment period has ended for both it was Bridge News is primarily a low power and Class A television owner, although they have a couple of full power stations. And then Disney, which is the owner of the ABC network stations, there were 0 complaints or comments on Bridge News's early renewals. So Nobody actually knows because Chairman Carr is never going to say what is really happening publicly. But our feeling among most of us who work in this industry as lawyers that the chairman is utilizing a power that the FCC has, and they do have it under a rule. They can call for an early renewal, which basically it's a way for the FCC to be able to say, listen, we don't think that this entity is operating in the public interest. They're violating this, that, and the other. We've come after them. They're not stopping. So an early renewal would make sense as essentially a final enforcement tool before you'd have to go to a hearing. In this case, it does seem to be like he's weaponizing that power to go after entities that he has a political beef with. And to be clear, to my knowledge, I do not think he has a political beef with Bridge News. We'll see if there ends up to be more like that. I mean, the FCC does have the power. It has been used, I think, once in its entire history before now. So take from that what you will.
Bill, do you have any final questions for Davina?
I have a lot, but I'll just say, crystal ball, Davina. There are two petitions that are of interest to me. One was filed well over a year ago by HC2 Broadcasting, the 5G ability for low power stations to convert to 5G broadcasting, which would in effect allow people to broadcast directly to smartphones. And the second one was in April. Landover Wireless made an interesting proposal to auction off channels 20 to 36 in a private auction. I haven't heard anything really about either of those lately. Just wondering what your crystal ball said.
On the HC2 petition, there actually was a lot of activity initially, and the petition did go on public notice. Comments were received. There's been meetings, ex parte meetings, but it has been quiet of late. I think part of the issue is because we've seen most of the activity in the media be focused in more political areas than on the future of the service. And not just political, but there's tension between the networks and the affiliates. And so Chairman Carr has made very clear he's on the side of the affiliates. And so he's focusing on that fight as well as what he sees as maybe alleged misuse of the airwaves by the likes of ABC. So that seems to be his focus. So I don't know why we haven't moved forward on the 5G petition. As for the Landover one, I do find it interesting that we haven't seen any meetings requested. We haven't seen any discussion in the press. There's got to be buyers of this spectrum. Otherwise, there's no need for an auction. You don't see a lot of public clamoring for this. It's certainly a super idea. I don't know if it has legs because it's never been done before, but also it doesn't seem like there's a ton of pressure from those who would benefit.
Well, thank you, Davina, for being with us today. Bill, you and I have already figured out what we're talking about next month in our September broadcast, which is how much am I worth? How much is my station worth? And Bill has definitive answers.
Or we'll bring some expert in who really does.
Okay, I think I'll interview you and you can interview me next month.
Fair enough.
All right. With that in mind, thank you so much for listening. Again, go to LPTVBA.com. Our podcast available on YouTube or, yes, drumroll, Spotify. So have a wonderful August, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the LPTV Broadcasters Association Podcast. If you have any questions or comments about this conversation, please email podcast@lptvbai.org. If you believe in the future of low power or local power television, we invite you to become a member of the LPTV Broadcasters Association. Your membership helps us advocate on your behalf in Washington, provide critical industry education, advance new technologies, and create opportunities that strengthen and grow our industry. Simply put, the work we do is made possible by the members we serve. Together, we can ensure that local television remains innovative, relevant, and impactful for generations to come.